It's fair to say that Atlus's Persona 5 has been a pretty resounding critical success. The game has found a way to connect with players using its charming characters, engaging gameplay, and its sprawling, twisting plot. But where it seems to strike a chord with most is through the bold, blunt way that it presents its ideas, almost slapping the audience in the face with them. And this presentation is no clearer than in the game's ending. Or rather, its true ending. Just a quick disclaimer, this video is going to mainly just focus on the messages of the final act of the game's story, and I will not be talking much about the characters, the gameplay, or any Jungian philosophy. This is also just my interpretation of the ending's themes, and I am not by any means saying that my way of thinking is the only way, or even that I'm correct. With all that said, let's get started. In general, Persona 5 works in an almost episodic structure, with each story segment focused on a palace and these segments tackling an umbrella of related themes, with the overarching narrative looming above all the while. And this is no different in its final act, where everything comes together, yet at the same time, some new thematic points are brought forth. The final part of the game, that is, from when you enter Mementos on December 24th to basically the last cutscene, is one that shifts gears again to focus primarily on themes of individualism versus collectivism, extremism, how distorted desires can lead to oppression, how this oppression leads to mass passivity, and the nature of reality and how it can be applied to the game's other ideas. In the story's climax, we find out that the man we believed to be Igor just ended up being a sort of malevolent entity named Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth was originally just a treasure of the masses within Mementos, but it took on a will of its own and became an evil god. This god then treated Joker as a pawn to essentially prove the stupidity and passivity of humanity by guiding him throughout the game using the metaverse. This stupidity of humanity is presented to the players throughout the game using extremes. On one extreme, we have the distorted hearts of the bosses within the story, using their will and lust for power to rule over others and cause bloodshed and misery. However, on the other, we have people who have submitted to what they believed was fate. They desire enslavement and an easy, safe ride through life, having given up on hope for anything better. The first extreme formed the distorted palaces built from corruption, and the second extreme created the Holy Grail and Yaldabaoth, spurred on by the defeatist masses. There seems to be two absolutes here, neither of which is anything approaching a good fate. There's actually a freedom in both contexts. The palace leaders have the freedom to do anything to a devastating fault, and the masses have the largely ironic, artificial freedom to live life despite not having to choose or think. I don't personally agree that this is freedom in any sense of the word, but the message is clearly expressed by the masses within the game. They somehow feel free from pressure and anxiety. Now, a person with the extremes of human desire becomes a distorted palace boss, but to eliminate this desire is wrong as well, as we see with the prisoners within the depths of Mementos. Here, we see the masses submitting and giving up, staying safe in a psychological comfort zone, and not even attempting to strive past what they see as inescapable boundaries set upon them by society and the world. This is the other extreme, opposite from the leaders of the palaces, and within it we see an almost forced ignorance, an artificial happiness, and an artificial existence. And by extension, we see that while people like Kamoshida or Shido had to be stopped due to their primal desire, to remove that instinct entirely is eliminating our choice, our true freedom, and our humanity. Yet, at the same time, ironically, this is still a type of desire, just a slothful, passive one. Yearning for happiness, yet not progressing towards it out of a learned helplessness. There seems to be both masters and apathetic slaves in this situation. The masters being the palace leaders who actively give in to their desire to become distorted and sadistically impose their will on others, and the slaves being the ones that passively succumb to desire to essentially become prisoners, eating out of the hand of fate, no matter how mundane or depressing that fate may be, purely for the sake of comfort and indolence. Both cases are antitheses of one another at opposite ends of the spectrum, and the game's intention is to say that neither is correct, and a dualistic balance of the two may be the way forward. This transcendence of extremes is not just relevant to what the game preaches philosophically, but it is literally demonstrated to be the case as a theme within the story outcomes as well. Yaldabaoth decides that if the world is left to the masses, society would only regress through their indolent ways. He has hopes of a rehabilitation, but through the events of the story, this is proven to be impossible, and destruction seems to be the only way forward for him. Yet, the party has always and continues to believe in social reform, the changing of hearts, and most of all, the faith that people can have the balls to better themselves. As explained within the game's story, Akechi represents the distortion of people, while Joker represents a nullification of distortion. If Akechi had won their rivalry, the world would have been destroyed and reformed again. In lore, this results in one of the bad endings, in the ruin of the world. If Joker won, the world would be left as is, there would be no destruction, and the Phantom Thieves would be beloved, but the masses would remain willful passengers of the Holy Grail. This is known as the early good ending, where the player agrees to Yaldabaoth's deal to revert the world to one of pseudo-happiness and comfort, one where crime and distortion is rampant, but the Phantom Thieves are adored for exposing this crime. Sojiro exclaims that things are worse than ever here, however, and this ending is looked down upon by the narrative because Joker essentially gives in and allows society to remain stagnant and indolent, which is implied to be the path to decay. So in the good ending, the masses continue to rot. In the bad ending, destruction occurs or the palace leaders carry out the deeds that the Phantom Thieves were trying to prevent. In these two endings, we have either decay leading to ruin, or destruction leading to ruin. However, there is a third option to bypass these extremes. In the true ending, we as the player transcend both of these and form a reasonable marriage of both extremes by becoming a trickster. One that embraces human nature, spirit, and primal desire, yet one that is fulfilled by those needs enough to have no need to reach an extreme. We don't stay long enough after the climax to see the long-reaching effects that the trickster has on Tokyo, but it is implied that a seed has been planted in the minds of the populace, and that it is now up to the adults to mold society into one that is desirable and beneficial to all. A true sociological reform. Within this conclusion, Persona 5 also proclaims that reality is what you make it. In Morgana's Goodbye, he says that the whole world is a product of cognition, not just the metaverse. What each person sees and feels, those are what shape reality. This is consistent with the philosophical concept of idealism, not to be confused with the ethical principle of ideals, which is more about endeavors and human spirit. This philosophical idealism has a strong emphasis on the mind and holds the view that the world is entirely mentally constructed. That what true reality is at the mercy of how you interpret it, and not a product of any physical interactions. As Ryuji says, if you want to change the world, all you've got to do is look at it differently. The metaverse, the nature of the cognitive world, the concept of stealing hearts, and so many more story points in Persona 5 hinge almost independently on cognition and perception to change views on the world and bring about subsequent actions. And this is all an interesting stance for the story to take, but this also extends thematically to become a message integrated with everything previously stated in this video. If the world truly is shaped by how a person experiences it, then if you apply that to a societal context, we see that we can morph society for the better through beliefs and ideals. That we can teach extremists the error of their ways and pave the way for a better future. Kind of like the social reform that the Phantom Thieves try to carry out all game. Above all, Persona 5 preaches that you should break free from any oppression to show assertiveness and self-worth. While this ending is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what the story is conveying, it is a pretty succinct summary of the narrative's mantra. That no matter who or what tries to oppress you, you should believe in yourself, take a stand, and pursue whatever you believe in to make society a better place. Because change can and will happen if you have resolve. These themes are hardly revolutionary, but they're given fresh emphasis through the game's bombastic presentation and execution. The dialogue does seem artificial or stunted at times in what seems like an attempt to nail home the point, but through the thematic variance in each arc and the game's character focus, Persona 5 refrains from bashing the gamer over the head with its themes or making the gamer feel stupid. And it was refreshing to see that there were repercussions for those whose hearts had been stolen, and that the way forward was through a compromise of passivity and desire, rather than the Phantom Thieves being right all along. It was all very fitting. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that you found this to be interesting in some way. It is definitely not the only way to look at the game's ending, so feel free to share your opinion in the comments below. Cheers guys, and have a good one.